Welcome to the Dental Decoders podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Rogars, and I'm here to help you crack the code on all things dental operations. Each week, we dive into topics to help you overcome roadblocks, streamline operations, and reduce team burnout. Whether you're an owner, a practice manager, or a team member, this podcast is for you. Join us for insightful discussions, engaging interviews, and practical tips. So sit back and relax as we crack the code on all things dental operations together. Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Dental Decoders. I am so stoked to have Sharon here to talk to you guys. Sharon is a friend of mine from my mastermind group. And one of the things that I'm really excited about with this podcast is to bring people into the dental space that you don't traditionally hear on dental podcasts. Sharon is an absolute tech wizard, and I am so excited to pick her brain on all things tech and systems and so many other fantastic topics. So Sharon, hi and welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am so glad to have you here. This is one of the interviews that got scheduled, and I was like counting the days. Every time I talk to you, I feel like, first of all, smarter, and second of all, super empowered. So I'm just super glad to have this conversation with you today. And one of the things that I'm really excited to talk to you about is that you work within the tech space, which is typically a male-dominated industry. I work in the dental field, which has also traditionally been a male-dominated space. It's starting to shift more so now, which is so exciting. But I would love to hear what advice you would give practice owners or any entrepreneurs really on how they can diversify inside their practice and have more of an inclusive type of workspace.
That's a great question. So one of the things that I participate in heavily in the tech community space is diversity in tech and women in tech. We have a lot of the same issues, as you can imagine. It is definitely male dominated. I'm usually, or for many years, have been one of the only women in the room. And I think, it really comes down to recognizing that that is an issue first and foremost. So when I talk to hiring managers about how can we diversify the resource pool, the answer I get back is, well, we don't have enough of those types of applicants. We're getting, 80, 90% maybe male applicants. And how do we get more diverse applicants? And I'm going to tell you now, I believe they're out there, but maybe they don't feel like they can apply to work at your location or for your business. And so they're not applying. And why is that? So, this is kind of becomes a domino effect, is that you have to kind of really think about why is it that you're not getting those applicants? And it's not because they're not out there. It's just because they don't see you as an option. So I would say first and foremost, make sure that whatever you're doing in marketing is, sharing the story that you are open to diverse hires and that you are looking for diverse hires, because I think that in and of itself will get you more people who are going to look at your company and be interested in applying, which increases your applicant pool. And then second, it's maybe going out in the community and maybe looking at places where, for example, if you're looking for people from dental schools, maybe go travel around to some dental schools and talk to those schools and be like, who are the diverse people that you have in this school and how can I help support or coach them into a role at my company? We've been finding that that's super helpful. There's been a lot more, and I'm going to call it girls in tech because it's younger ladies that are in middle school, high school, college that we're really going after and saying, hey, we want to show you that there's opportunity here. Statistically, for women in tech, only less than 20% of the large tech companies have women in technology roles. And by the time they're 35, 50% of those women move on into a different role that is not a technology-based role. So,
wow.
Just the numbers themselves, it's just such a low number that I think actively going out and recruiting is probably going to be required. You can't just sit back and say, well, no girls are applying, so we're not hiring them. That's not a good excuse. What are you doing to change that story and change that narrative so that you're getting whatever minority you're after, whatever diverse candidate you're after? Like, what are you doing to tell those diverse candidates that you want them to come and work for you?
I think that's so relevant to so many practices. I know even outside of actual dentists, just having women in the field, obviously the hygiene departments have always been relatively female led, but even looking for front desk or assistants or anywhere in the field that you can diversify. So I think that'll be super applicable to everyone. I've also spoken very openly about age. When I started in the dental industry, I was 21 or 22. So I was very young and not taken seriously for those reasons. So I think the idea of reaching out to younger demographics to pull them into the industry early is going to, one, help them curb that type of experience that I had, and two, also just make it easier to mold the perfect candidate for your role because you're getting them interested in the field so young.
Yep, I totally agree.
You talked about marketing and how are we presenting this to female entrepreneurs or female future dentists or females in tech or whatever the industry may be. What are some ways that we can share that information in a way that's going to be impactful without it seeming fake or without it seeming like we're trying too hard? You know, you see a lot of the times where people are trying to push for a specific demographic and then you actually walk into the practice and the marketing front that they put on, like, we're super women friendly, we want to hire young people, is not really the vibe in the practice. So what is a way that dentists could potentially reach that diverse demographic in a way that seems authentic?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we think about marketing in general, it doesn't matter if you're marketing a product or marketing a hire. It's all the same thing. So if you're marketing a product and you don't deliver a product, then then your customers are going to be unsatisfied because you're going to market something, they're going to purchase it, and then they're going to maybe go on Yelp or they're going to go on Google and say, Psh, this is not what I thought it was. It's not as good. It has problems. And so I think when we think about marketing for candidates, it's the same exact thing. Market whatever it is that you're actually doing. So this is going to require a culture shift in a company level culture shift. And this is something I've been working with clients on for a very, very long time and speaking on for a very long time, is that, culture doesn't change overnight, but if you want it to change, you can. And so I would really encourage leadership to practice what you preach. And if you really want to hire diverse candidates, think about what those diverse candidates are going to need. And it may not be exactly the same as what your current culture is. In technology, you can see, technology is always at the forefront of any innovative culture shift, right? So post-COVID, right? So post the pandemic, like during the pandemic, we saw a lot of people go to remote work. Now you got to remember, in tech, we've been doing remote work for years. So this is very normal for us. We're really used to it. It's nothing different. The pandemic happens and all of a sudden, oh, we need remote work. Do you even understand what this is like? And I'm like, dude, I've been doing this for years. Like, what do you mean everybody doesn't do this? So it's that idea of, if you want your culture to be a certain way, you need to think about what is that going to look like. And we think about things like remote work. People with small children are attracted to flexible schedules. They're attracted to remote work options. They're attracted to co-sharing, like co-desk sharing, where maybe it's two part-time people are filling a full-time role. If you want more people that fit into a diverse demographic, just like you put effort into sales and marketing about your target client, you need to think about that for your target hire as well. Those people are probably not going to be the same people you've been hiring and working with for all these years. So the idea that you're going to then market and try to hire people who are different than the norm in the way that you're doing it now is just silly. And so you need to think about what's my target hire look like, in the same way I think about a target audience or a target buyer or target customer. What are they going to need to be successful in working with them? Because if I, for example, say I want to hire more women candidates, and especially maybe at a dental practice, they're going to be of normal momming age. Okay, let's be really honest. We're just going to talk it. They've got kids, they've got husbands, they've got houses, they've got parents, they've got families. And we know that culturally, especially in the United States, the woman bears the brunt of that load. I think if you're saying we want more women in these roles, but you're not on the flip side saying we need to recognize that these women are going to have a different level of obligation than what we're used to. And so we're going to put some policies in place to be able to support that, or we're going to put some hiring practices in place, or we're going to put some changes into the way that we do our culture in place. If you're not doing that, then you're not actually trying to hire diverse. What you're doing is you're saying, I want to hire diverse, but we're not putting our money where our mouth is. It's the same thing as if you want a certain kind of customer. If you want a high luxury clientele customer, you better have a bottle of water waiting for them when they walk in that door, right? If you walk in and it's a old crappy building and maybe where we don't have 3D anything and they have to go out to 3 or 4 different places to get things done and you have to handwrite insurance. Think of all these things that happen in a medical practice that like you would never do for a high level clientele, right? Why would it? So we change these things, right? My dentist has the little 3D thing you put in your mouth and it does like the 3D imaging, which is like the coolest thing I've ever seen, right? My friend just got a new crown and they did a 3D print on her permanent crown. I have had 3D prints on my temporary crowns, but she literally got her permanent one, like right there in the office that day. These are things you think about for high-end luxury clientele. If they're going to be putting cash down, like you need to be delivering something that's a higher quality product. So think about this in the same way when you're hiring. When you hire people, what is it that candidate needs to make them feel successful in your business?
For sure. I love that. I think that there was one thing in there that I want to volley back to, so I don't want to forget that. But I think that it seems like common sense, like when you're going to market something, even if it is to a hire instead of to a customer, like make those shifts for that person. But we all know that common sense isn't always necessarily that common. And when you said that, even for me, it was like, oh, light bulb, like duh, but also, oh, like very eye-opening. So I think that's awesome. I wanted to ask you, since we were talking about 3D printers and all of the tech that we could have available, an office, especially who is going to be out trying to attract maybe younger, fresh dentists who just get out of school, or younger people to work at their desks, people that they can build into their ideal dental employee, they're going to want to try and find a balance between their technology and finding ways to improve their technology so it can entice these younger people coming into the industry. We all know millennials and like younger and really pretty much everybody likes the shiny new toys. I myself personally like to work for offices that are very modern and techy. So what is some maybe uncommon ways that dentists can kind of balance bringing in new tech while still also managing to have these maybe not fresh dentists on their team? So if we're going to have a wide age range here, we're going to have the older dentists and the younger dentists. What's a way that they can maybe balance bringing in some of that new tech?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I refer to this as modern work, and that's actually what our business does is we provide services, products, and support around modern work. And the idea of modern work is how do we use technology to serve us instead of serving technology? And so before modern work, and modern work really is built around the cloud infrastructure. So it's the idea of we have things in the cloud, meaning that we can very quickly, easily connect. We also have mobile devices, so now we can leave the office to do work if we need to, right? But we have to think about that in terms of the entire ecosystem. So when we think about changes in modern work, when I think about shifts in the way that people do things and maturing in the way that people use modern work practically, day-to-day logistics, there's all kinds of options. So we do everything from storing your content in a cloud share instead of maybe on a server at your office where everybody could access that information remotely if they needed to. That way, if there's a snowstorm, the dentist can still look at those files and respond to patients, or maybe administration could look at medical billing and do that at home instead of having to go into the office to do that work. And that way you're not losing value. So from an efficiency standpoint, you're getting value out of that, being able to send it remotely. And I'm not saying that you have to have all of your employees be remote just because you have the availability to be mobile. But adding that mobility into it provides value that you don't think about. In addition, like when we think about things like implementing, so I do a lot of work with Microsoft, so we implement a lot of M365, and you think about things like SharePoint or OneDrive, that's all searchable. And so one of the things to consider is as you're putting all that information into a system, oftentimes you use applications where it's hard to find things for internal documents, right? So it's things like setting up good search practices, being able to find things on their computers, making them easily accessible on their mobile devices. And that's just inside the offices, let alone with the toys, so like the 3D printers and the 3D scanners. And I think all of that is great, but just kind of basic fundamental maturity in modern work is storing content in a way that is accessible off-site and can be backed up and is easy for disaster recovery, making things accessible remotely where people can access them from other locations or mobile devices. In addition, we think about things like where you're including your customer in your modern work plan. So, I personally absolutely love not having to call a medical provider to be able to book an appointment. So if you can provide me a way to go to your website or go on a mobile app and say, I want to be able to book an appointment, show me your availability, make an appointment. I sit on phone calls all day for a living. And so it's very difficult for me sometimes to call, be put on hold 3 times, look at my calendar, look at their calendar. Like, this is like, it's already painful just thinking about it. If I can go on an app and be like, hey, what's available? Let me put it on my calendar. The more that digital technology works with me as a client, the easier it is, let alone the fact that now your front desk staff doesn't have to do half of that. If I can book my own appointments, that is efficiency because they're not sitting on the phone answering phone calls for people who just want to book appointments. They can focus that time and effort on something else that may be a little bit more important. The last thing we think about, and not the last, but another big thing that we think about is like digital processing. So I know, fun fact that I don't know if you knew or not, but I actually started pre-med and I worked in pharmacy for 7 years in retail pharmacy. And I did a lot of the third-party billing and rejects back to Medicaid and Medicare. So I spent a lot of time like actually filling out those old forms and turning them back in for reject codes. I know that world and the insurance world very, very well. When we think about, so one of the things that I've done in my career is I worked on software to allow people to electronically transact and electronically send those insurance things in through gateways. And so I think the more that you are using those integrations to be able to submit all of your claims and electronically send, electronically receive, electronically process. And the more you can get rid of those paper processes, the more efficient it is, the easier it is, the faster it is for you to be able to do some of those things in your office.
I do remote dental billing, so I completely appreciate everything you just said about having access to everything remotely. And the software that I work with is open source, so it allows you to do a lot more integrations than most of the other softwares out there. So everything you just said really hit home. The web schedule piece too, I think, is interesting because you can schedule appointments for just about everything online now. I schedule my hair appointment online. I schedule my doctor's appointments online. But one thing that is not super common in the dental world is being able to schedule online. And I know for me, first thing I do when I look for an office is I look at their Google reviews. But then the second thing I look for is, can I schedule this without a phone call? And that's a huge thing for me. And I think it's going to be very soon in the future where if you don't have web schedule capabilities, you're going to fall behind. So all of that was really just hitting home for me. I do want to ask you, as offices are starting to build these transitions and introducing new tech and introducing new options and shifting our culture a little bit, team member resistance is going to be a thing that we're going to have to combat. So what is something that offices can do, or a couple of some things that offices can do to help support their teams through these transitions and have it result in staff retention, have it not result in your 3 best people walking out, which unfortunately seems to be relatively common as we're doing these shifts in the industry?
Yeah, so we look at that as under user adoption, and user adoption is aligned very well with employee experience and with user experience. And the thought with this is, for I think a dental office, you're thinking employee experience, you're thinking your customer experiences, you're thinking how is everybody kind of functioning day to day. And what happens often is that we bring tech in for the sake of tech. And when you do that and you don't think about how does it align with what we do day to day, how does it marry into our existing processes, how does it solve our pain points, then what ends up happening is you create an additional pain point that you're not solving for your employees or for your clients. So one of the things that I really, really push hard on for in terms of user adoption, employee experience, and client experience is, what do you do now? What are your pain points, and how can technology help you solve your pain points? What we really want when we implement technology, first and foremost, is to do it slowly, one bite at a time. We do not want to let's just dump all the new tech on you all at once and make you learn it all on top of your full-time job that you're probably already overworked at. Let's pick something slowly and implement it. But first of all, what are your pain points? Let's focus on those things. Well, my pain points are I take too many phone calls. Well, let's implement a web scheduling program, right? This is going to help solve your immediate problem. It's going to make your clients happy. And it's a fairly easy thing that's not going to require a ton of effort on your part. Maybe then we move into something else. So never, ever, ever implement multiple things at once. Always implement one thing at a time. Make sure you train your staff on what's going to happen. Communicate well with what that implementation plan is going to look like, and roll it out over not all at once, but also not a long period of time. You want it to be long enough that they feel comfortable with the rollout, but short enough that you're not dragging it on forever and ever and ever. And then the other piece of that, like I said, is prioritize it based on pain points. So make sure, I always say this, make tech serve you, not the other way around. Tech should be solving your problems. If the tech is not solving your problems, do not invest in it and do not do it. We don't need more problems in our lives. So I think if you just simply follow that for every single thing that you implement, what's going to happen is your employees are going to be happier, your clients are going to be happier, because that tech is solving pain points for you and you're modernizing at the same time.
That iTero scanner is a big thing. So that digital impression that you were talking
I
about.
love it.
Yeah, those are game changers for patients. And when you don't have to like gag on impression material and retake it 7 times, I think it's a huge asset to your practice. There's going to be ROI on that. Your case acceptance is going to be improved. It's just the actual process of rolling it out for the team. And I think that all has to kind of boil down to how you present it to your team too, because it may not be affecting a pain point of that individual team member who's taking the impressions, but it does go full circle and really improve your patient experience. So I think I really like speaking to the pain points and making sure people are aware that it may not be your specific pain point, but someone in our practice is going to benefit from this new tech.
Well, and the most important piece to any sort of user adoption is training. Train before, train during, train after. I think the more people understand what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and how to do it, then they kind of buy in a little bit better and they feel like they're part of that decision. And they also understand what it is so that if somebody asks them, they can say, oh yeah, this is why we did this. And they feel confident, as opposed to being like, I don't even know why they brought this in. It's just wasting my time and making my life harder.
Yeah, I do a lot of software conversions. So I help offices switch from their current software to the software that I primarily work with. And I can't tell you how many times I go into the practice and they're like, I've been using the old software for 40 years. I don't know why we're doing this. And that to me, for one, it's a barrier I have to get around. I have 5 days to help you guys learn this software, and I have to spend a good chunk of that getting you to understand why we're here and how this is helpful for you in the first place. So I think that that's one key piece that would definitely be important to anybody listening. If you're going to implement anything new, make sure you start with that why piece so they understand why we're there, and the resistance that comes from that will just not maybe diminish, but it'll at least reduce it. So as we wrap this episode, I always end with the same question. And that question is, can you share your decoding moment or your secret code with our listeners? Any piece of information or any tip that you have that was instrumental in your career or something that these offices could implement in their practice?
Yeah, I mean, so I always say that my secret sauce is genuine, authentic relationships. And I know that sounds silly. Like you said, common sense isn't so common. But at the end of the day, I definitely do my best to communicate directly but kindly. I try really hard to not burn bridges if I don't have to. I try hard to, manage the energy that's around me and who I hang around and what I do. But mostly it's because I just feel like at the end of the day, no matter what we're talking about, we're all just people. At the end of the day, we all just want to know that when we get up in the morning, we have a home to go to and we have food to eat and we can take care of our kids and we can have a little bit of joy in life. And so I think that if you keep that in mind and you just remember that people are only human, and that, if you're genuine, authentic in who you are and you're genuine, authentic in all of your relationships, that the rest just kind of sorts itself out.
If any of our listeners want to reach out to you to find out more about what you do or to work with you, where can they find you?
They can always just look me up. If you're looking for e-consulting work, we're on smarter-consulting.com. If you want to read my personal blog, it's sharoneweaver.com. And then all you really have to do is just search for me. Just if you put in Sharon Weaver in Microsoft or Sharon Weaver in SharePoint, you probably could just find me online and hunt me down wherever you want.
Sharon's kind of a big deal, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. I will put all of your links in our show notes here so everybody will be able to find the one and only Sharon. And thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Dental Decoders podcast. We hope you took away a valuable piece of information. As always, don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe to help us build our community of dental decoders. We look forward to seeing you for next week's episode.